Yeah, hi everyone. This is my first team for SuperCoach 2022. Um, start off, we got Jake Lloyd here. Why I picked him because he's consistent and reliable for a number of years. He's also more of a lock this year due to his cheaper price point. Last year was around at 640, which is why he wasn't as popular as what he could have been if he was a bit cheaper. He also had bit of an injury cloud at the start. Not too bad, but yeah, wasn't was still a bit shaky at the start, but managed to perform well um, towards the end of the season, which is the reason why he still has a high price. Next one, Jack Crisp. Why have I picked him? Because he's one of the probably the most durable player in the game. He's very consistent last year. I had him in 2020. Where he was still solid, but wasn't quite consistent, unlike some of the other defenders. But I wish I picked him last year. He did have that poor bye, but if you stuck with him, it would have been worth it. Um, Fortunately, a lot of people missed out on him, so it'd be more of a popular selection this year due to the defensive and midfield multiple position status. So you can play, so he's a defender and midfielder, which could help with some weeks, particularly during this season with COVID. So hopefully, he maintains that consistency, and he's at the right age too. He's at his peak years, peak age, and he was Collingwood's best player last year. Deserve the Brownlow votes he gets. Probably the best defender last year too, to be honest. If he can, most likely, I really expect him to continue this form that he's in, simply because he's going to be playing the midfield more often due to Pendlebury and Sidebottom aren't that fit, aren't themselves anymore. They're deteriorating as a footballer. They'll still have good games, but this isn't about them. So that's why I chose Cresp. And Ridley, why'd I pick him? Well, simply because I'm an Essendon supporter and I believe in this guy is going to be generally one of the best defenders in the next few years. He's shown that last year at times. He was one of the best Supercoach players at one point at the start of the season, but then injuries slowed his season down. He had a few crap games, but managed to remain somewhat consistent after that by getting some good scores. Do I reckon he can continue that form this year? Absolutely. I reckon he will go up in price, improve his average, providing he doesn't get injured, of course. He is becoming towards those peak years. He can still improve. He's still fairly young. So I do have high hopes for Ridley. The only concern I really got is that sometimes he does drop those 60 scores, and that can really hinder your score, particularly if it's a tight game with an opponent. So hopefully he can be a bit more consistent with that and make the lower scores like 90 or 80 to hopefully have more of a bit more consistency. But overall, he could be the best defender, to be honest, in terms of Supercoach wise. Now with the rookies here, Johnson, there's been a bit of a hype, good news about him. Obviously, it's kind of difficult with the last couple of seasons with rookies due to the COVID, and it's hard to grasp what information you can get out of them, particularly the Victoria ones. Wait until pre-season to see if he's playing, if he's selected. Um, Hopefully, he's able to play quite throughout the pre-season. Forms a good game, so I can select him. He's playing for Port though, so they are a top four team. Or maybe they're expected to finish around the top four. Cheesy. Yeah, well, I've picked him. He's a defensive midfielder also, which may come in handy. He's also mid-price rookie, so not too expensive, not cheap either. West Coast need those young players, so hopefully you can perform well in pre-season, just like Josh Shin, and hopefully he get a game and perform well. Aaliyah, again, He's similar to Poilade Alialia. Very athletic, probably one of the most athletic players to come out of the draft. But the biggest problem with him is he can't find the ball, which is probably the biggest flaw. You need to be able to get the ball to be able to score points consistently. Taking intercept marks will net you a fair amount of points, but if he doesn't do that, then he's kind of going to get those really low scores, and that's the biggest problem with this pick. And I can see why some people might not pick him. If he can be in the side and perform well, it'd be great. I don't think this player can reach the 400k mark. I don't think this year. Just hasn't got the just probably won't get enough disposables to do so. If we can increase his disposable count, then I reckon he can. And Driscoll, I don't know much about, but there's heard good news about him. Hope he can get a game. Depending on if Freo can have injuries, he hopefully be able to get a game. And if he performs well in pre-season, because Freo have had quite a few injuries back there, so there's a slight chance he might actually get a decent crack. And O'Malley, I don't know anything about this guy. He's cheap, 102k. Could it be used as a loophole? So we'll see. That will probably change by round 1. Okay, midfield is here. Gone with very popular pick, McRae. He's probably a bit expensive in my opinion. I can see why. He's probably the most consistent SuperCoach player, which is why he's the most expensive player. That sort of player. He probably isn't the best player, but you probably take Bontempelli over him. But the thing is, with SuperCoach, McRae's a lot more consistent. Able to get more of the ball than Bontempelli, which is why there's less. It's more reliable pick. Bontempelli can probably get 200, has a higher potential, higher capacity, higher and I think that's why but has a lower floor, and that's the problem with Bontempelli, which is why people don't really start with him. So McRae, probably a little bit expensive in my opinion. You might be able to go down in price. If he has like a few poor games, like in the high 90s or lower hundreds, you can probably pick him up then. But you really want to start with a player like him. It doesn't get injured either too, which is why it's going to be even more difficult to get him. So again, you're probably a little bit overpriced, but we'll see how that flows. Jack Steele, 685. Again, this is probably a bit expensive too, but unlike McRae, you can score a bit higher. You can increase that scoring potential. I reckon too. He's in his peak years now. Probably Ken Rindle Brownload is that sort of player. He's more of a defensive midfielder. So you can get scoring off tackles. So if St Kilda's having a poor game, he'll still be able to get high scores defensively. So which is why I picked him. This could change depending if I have on other selections based on my side. But yeah, at the moment he's probably almost basically a lock. Same with McRae. Unless anything crazy happens like an injury, that will just throw this side off a bit. Next one, Tom Mitchell. A bit cheaper than some of the other players. Why have I gone Mitchell? Simply because he had an excellent second half run. I believe at one point he was priced at 500k last year, and if you picked him at that point, I wish I did. I was going to, but I just couldn't due to other issues with my side. If you picked him, you would have been laughing. He has won a Brownlow medal too, so he has that potential in terms of scoring. Absolute contestant ball player, so he'll win you the ball. He's one of the best players at doing that, which is why he's priced so high and why he won that Brownlow that year, 2018, I believe. So Mitchell, I reckon, pretty much a lock for me. The only concern is that injury, but he's done to overcome that and coming back to his best after a shaky start last season. Sam Walsh. Now this guy could be anything. He almost won a Brownlow in his third year. Not many players will be able to do that. I reckon some of the Brownlow votes were a bit lucky though. He probably didn't deserve some of them, but yeah, he's definitely Carlton's best player now. He's overtaken Cripps. That's another story though. Do I reckon Walsh could win a Brownlow this year? I reckon he could. Uh, the thing is with Walsh, he's just not quite as consistent as your McRae's, as you even Tom Mitchell, your Steele's, not quite as consistent. He has that scoring potential, can score really highly. I just don't think, you know, his floor is just a bit low for a player of his price. He did get scores of the low 80s and 90s, and you can't really have that for a player you're paying over 600k for, which is why he's not the high 600s yet. I reckon he can. I reckon he can prove he's scoring even more. That being said, not every young player has a linear score. It could be an off year for him, but I doubt that's simply because Carlton um, just don't have that midfield don't have another player on his level at the moment. You do have Shearer coming in. Will that have an impact? Maybe a little. Will Cripps Will Cripps come back to form? Who knows? That may affect that pick. May affect him. I don't know. But at the moment, maybe Shearer could be a threat, but at the moment, I can't really see it. He's heading towards that peak years. He's going to improve even more. He could be the top scorer midfielder this year. Who knows? He could be that Brownlow medalist. I think at the age of 22, he will be. So 21. Yeah, there's lots to like about Walsh. But he does have that. His floor is a bit lower than what you want for a player of his price, which is why some people probably won't pick him. I can understand why you won't. Lachie Neale, now he had a pretty ordinary season last year with injury. He had a few good games, but right from the get-go, there was problems with him with his injury. It was annoying that Brisbane didn't really tell much about his injury problems at the start, and it stuffed up a lot of people's seasons. A lot of people's starts this season with SuperCoach. He started at 700k, and now he's 540. So people lost money off him, and if you didn't pick Neale at the start and pick like a McRae or a Steele or an Oliver instead, if you didn't have those at the start, you would have been laughing miles ahead of everyone else. Hopefully Neale go back to that Brella medal form. It is back to regular quarters, so that might be a bit of might not suit Neale as much, particularly with the rule changes that have happened since then. So he does have that high scoring potential, that ceiling. We just want to hopefully that injury doesn't affect him. If he can fit and firing at the start of the season, he should be fine, and he'll make money and should be in the top 5, top 3, at least in the top 10 midfielders, providing he doesn't get injured, of course. So only the problem is the injury, basically. Is the only concern. Jared Berry, why have I picked him? Well, because he had a high average in 2019 and 2020. So 2020 had a high average of 97, which is good. He has that potential, has that high scoring potential. Just his ceiling and his injury just slowed down his career growth a bit, and which is the reason why he's 268, which is clearly underpriced. This is probably the only mid-price of the midfielders I would pick. You got him or Matt Rowell, and Dylan Shield, which were all overcoming injuries, but I just feel very slightly cheaper, and he's probably at more of that age where he's at his peak, heading towards his peak. Matt Rowell's probably a year or two behind him, I'd say. That's another video story we could talk about. The only concern is that his floor is kind of low. What you want for a premium, which he will be a premium player if he goes back to his best. He probably could average 105. It's not a guarantee though. With injuries and with competing against Neil and Lions, which is the biggest problem here with Brisbane. Like with Neil, you got high competition since Brisbane do have a decent midfield. Hopefully though, that won't impact him as much. This is probably the riskiest pick here, I would say. out of the ones that are at least over 250k in his squad. So if a lot of people pick him, it's not quite as a risk. And again, it's not quite as much of a reward either. So we'll see where he goes. If he's fit and firing, he'll be in my side for round 1. Nick Dacos, it's pretty straightforward. Everyone knows about him. He's probably the most high-profile pick in the draft. Seems to be like the best player out of the draft by the sounds of it. So yeah, everyone's picked him. I mean, you've got most information about him. High disposable winner. Just everything's good about Nick Dacos. So he should start round 1 easily. It is a bit of a jump though to the AFL, which is probably a bit of the only concern. He's going to be playing against much stronger, much better players, much fitter, stronger players. Not necessarily fitter, but stronger players. So keep that in mind too. Don't expect him to dominate at AFL level yet. He may play a few good games. Hopefully he has a good start. That way we can sell him off. I mean, if he has an excellent start, he could even be a keeper. But as we saw with Goulden last year, he only had a couple of good games and then disappeared after that. So, which is a bit disappointing. He had a few of some of the superb debut games and just, hit the cliff and just fell from it. I think Dacos will be more consistent than that. Since Collingwood are a weaker team or a rebuilding side, so you should have plenty of game time. That's it for Nick Dacos. Now Ben Hobbs, this is probably one. This is the one that I'm unsure about. I'm not particularly happy with the midfield, the rest of the midfield here with the bench, and simply because the rookies are just hard to pick. I don't know if Hobbs is going to play. It's going to be tough with the Essendon midfield since it's fairly strong. Not necessarily strong, but there's a lot of good solid players there. You got McGrath, you obviously got Parrish, Merritt, you got Stringer, Langford. There's too much competition there. So it's just even Cardwell, it's just Shield, just everyone's there. Just none of those players are bad players. They're all at least either average or good players at least. So it's going to be tough to break in the midfield. So he's probably hoping for an injury, and there could be an injury if my side Essendon have a lot of injuries. Ben Holmes is likely to, get in the squad if he performs well pre-season. In the VFL. So hopefully, he does, and even performs really well and even get into round 1. But I doubt that. So he'll be either a bench rookie or someone we'll bring in later on. I might have to try to fiddle around and see if I can bring in a rookie that will start round 1 for my starting side. That's the only problem we really have with this midfield other than the cover here. We don't know if they're playing any of these players. So that's probably what's going to change here, which I'll have to keep Dacos. I'll have to fiddle around with it, but we'll wait until the start of the season for that sort of stuff. Now with the rucks here, gone with the boring combo of Darcy and Grundy. I just think Darcy his ceiling's this way too high, one of the highest in the comp, which is why he scores a 190. It's just, if you're missing out on that, you're missing out on the pot of gold. Basically, isn't Freo seem to find these great ruckmen. After Centerlands now has retired, they found Darcy. Look, he has a higher average than Grundy, averaged higher than Grundy, and it's probably going to average higher than Gordon too. Still think Gordon's a better player than both of these two players. You got Luke Jackson there, which is going to eat up his time. A bit higher competition there for Melbourne, unlike Freo and Collingwood. There's Sean Darcy's clearly Freo's number 1 ruckman. They don't have any ruckman that's nowhere near Darcy in terms of ability. And same with Grundy. I think Max Lynch has gone to Hawthorn, so they don't really have anyone there. Darcy Cameron, I guess. But I don't think he'll impact the score. He's more of a forward, so he'll be playing more on the forward. So Grundy, hopefully he can get back to his best. Wasn't quite as good as last year. Was good at some times, but just wasn't reaching that high level ceiling as much as what he used to. So there's a slight more risk with Grundy this year with a injury cloud. I think this year you could probably even roll the dice and try, someone like a Sam Draper or a Jared Witts, who has history of being a good ruckman, if you want to save money and try and make money. But I reckon it's a bit of a gamble if you've got Sean Darcy, since he has a lot of injuries. Now, I do think Max Gorn's better than both, but Max Gorn, has at least somewhat competition or a player who can, take a more of a part-time ruck option. Will eat up Gorn's ruck minutes. Well, Darcy and Grundy don't have that. As for the bench, well, you got Bruce here. It's probably a lot of people got Sharp. Well, what I've seen, it's either Sharp or Bruce at the moment. Well, it looks like there could be a few other ruckmen too. I reckon Bruce has a high scoring potential. Just if he can get in the park, if he can get in the park fit and firing for at least half the season to make that money, or even as a good backup option for your rucks, just in case Darcy or Grundy, particularly Darcy, seems to get injured, but managed to still scores high, which is great. So Bruce, you can't have him as your starting pick, no way. But as a good emergency option, 200k is probably a bit higher for an emergency. So if I need that extra money to fill around my side, I'll probably have to drop down to a rookie or someone cheaper who's going to be playing, but might not make as much money though, or have that high scoring potential. He's just one of the most unlucky ruckman players in the comp at the moment. Braden Bruce is, when he's looking good, then gets injured. No, fortunately, that's just luck sometimes. Life sometimes. Okay, Josh Dunkley. Everyone seems to have him, so it's about an almost lock. If you don't have him, you're kind of missing out. There's a bit of risk with him too, with his injury. He hasn't performed quite as well after the injury. He's one of the best SuperCoach players as well. Just before injury, just like Ridley, the injury impacted his season and hasn't quite reached that same level. Still be one of the best four-line options. Hopefully he can get back to that form that he was at the start of last season, getting an average of 130 at one point or somewhere around then. I don't think he'll get that this season. He could with the Miff, but it's just so competitive with the Bulldogs, just everything about that side. So, yeah, absolute lock. Everyone has him, so I'm not going to talk too much about him. Zach Butters, well, I've picked him. Well, it's his high scoring, his ceiling um, is probably the best asset of Butters. If he can play in a midfield more. When he played against Essendon, my side, he scored 167 or something around that. And he scored like 100 points at half time, I think, against Richmond as well, before he got injured. Something crazy like that. So he has a huge potential with scoring. Probably one of the highest out of the forward line. It's just his floors is too low to get that premium status, that elite status yet. He's still young, so he has a few years to develop. So not overly concerned. Just that floor is a real problem. And is he able to return to pre-injury form? Is he able to come back from the injury if he can, stay fit and firing? And again, like a lot of these other players, are they going to perform to their peak? Are they going to overcome injury? And that's the thing we need to look at. Hopefully, Butters can go in the midfield more often. I reckon he can as he becomes more adept, and as Broke gets older, you need someone else to go in there. So yeah, I reckon Butters is almost lock, but there is still slight concerns. You can probably take a gamble with a Triano or a Taror, but Taror's got an injury cloud, and that's another video for another day. Coniglio. Now, this is obviously a lock for obvious reason. His price point is obviously well below his potential with the price here. He's had a terrible last couple of seasons, disappointing, performing well below potential plus injury, which seems to be a problem. Common theme with GWS. I don't know what's wrong with GWS there. It's either their medical staff or I don't know what they're doing up there, but this player seems to get injured, and it's a good player. So, yeah, with Coniglio, I think the captain's having captain's not really a good idea. Seems to affect his performance, and he just has his mind on it. Taking away a captain sometimes is a good idea for players. Less stress, less to worry about. I still think, as the pick itself, I reckon he can go up to over 500k and even get the 105 or at least 100 plus average if he can play in that midfield and dominate there. So Caniglio, most people have him. Obvious reasons. He has the potential. He has had past years of scoring well. Do I reckon he can get there? Yes, I do, but he needs to, be a bit more professional, keep himself fit, and he should be able to perform back to his best. Charlie Curnow. Now, this is one of those ones that's probably a bit of a gamble and probably the most risky pick in this forward line here. And he's a key forward as well, which could be good and bad. For SuperCoach, it's usually bad, but if he plays a few against some weak opponents, he's able to get the ball more on the forward line and kick a bag of goals. As he's done it against, I think, the Bulldogs at 2019, he kicked a bag. So if he can do that a couple of weeks in a row, a few good weeks, high score weeks in a row, he can bump that score to 450, bump that price up to 450, and you can sell him off, bringing either a rookie or a premium or a keeper player. So that's what we look with these key forwards. With Danaher last year, MP, you were able to do it even though they were high risk picks with injury cloud over them. Finn McGuinness. Don't know much about this guy, but he's a full midfielder, so it's one reason why you should pick him. The Hawthorn are a developing side, so there's highly likelihood he can come back in. Hopefully he has a good pre-season and get games early on. Not much to say about him. Like with most of these rookies, there isn't too much information about him. Elijah Hollands, this player, a lot of people have him. Apparently didn't play last year. I think he had injury problems, I believe. I'm not too sure much. I don't know too much about him, but if you can get in the side this year, keep fit and firing, that'd be great. As for Sam Butler, I don't know much about him, but he's forward midfielder, so one of those rookies we have to look out for to see if we play round one. It's probably one of those rookies we have to bring in later on this season. And same with Williams here. Don't know much about him, but he's a forward ruck, so he could be useful. But I don't have a forward ruck here, which is a bit unfortunate. It's a bit of a shame though. You don't have players like Rowan Marshall in the forward line. It would have made it more useful. Made the forward line a bit easier to pick from. Overall, there's lots of players I could have picked here. I'll probably make videos about them, why I haven't, and why I should. Some of you are probably explaining why haven't you picked Hall again. Hall's somewhat of a high risk pick with his injury cloud. I still believe he could get to that score, same the score as what he did last year, maybe improve. But he's at that age where he's at his peak, or even maybe starting to get on with it a little bit. But we'll talk about that maybe in another video. All right. Hope you liked the preview, my first team. Thank you for watching.